Hello again and welcome to Digital Log by DPM. Today it's me again hosting this episode and I have Simon with me from our UX design department.
Hi.
Hi Simon. It's a pleasure. Today we're going to talk about prototyping, which is something that we regularly do in the UX department, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's also something that we recommend our clients to do before jumping into the implementation phase of product development. Simon, maybe you want to give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and let us know why we're talking about prototyping.
Sure. I'm Simon. I'm a senior user experience designer at DPM and I rather consider myself a generalist in this field. So I do quite everything from user research to conceptual work and visual design and also some front-end development.
Wow, which is not a designer task, right? Like a typical designer task.
Not necessarily, but it helps. It definitely helps. And I would also say that this interaction part is the one that I'm most passionate about because their products come to life. And regarding prototyping, this is not only necessary or helpful in the interaction part, but even before. So in every step of the product development phase, you can use prototypes, and I think this is what we will talk about today.
And maybe that's also the reason why it's something that you're doing so often in your daily work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, it's just very helpful because imagine you have a product idea, a great product idea, and you think, okay, I want to build it immediately.
That's what I always think when I have an idea. Let's go and do it.
Yeah, and then so you have this impatient self on your shoulder that says, okay, let's do it right away. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
But then there's the smart self on the other side that says, well, we could build it right now, but there are so many open questions. Like, do users even need our product? Do users use our product, or how do they use it? How would they use it? And yeah, these are all questions that we can answer with prototypes because they are then a common ground for all involved people, and yeah, just visualizing our ideas and bringing them out of our head so that we can talk about them.
All right, I have a basic understanding of why we're talking about prototypes today and why it's an important thing to do. But maybe you can, or we can just step one or go one step back and you can explain what a prototype really is for people who are not working in the UX department doing that every day.
A prototype is basically a simplified model of a product or a feature. So that means you have the visualized product, but without the whole functionality. It feels like it would work, but there is no back end, no data that really comes into the prototype. It's just for showing what you think the product should look like. And by visualizing this without the need to implement it right away, we can save a lot of resources, budget, and probably also nerves.
All right, so a prototype is basically the visualization of a product idea that I have in my head. So would I build one by just taking a piece of paper and scribbling it down, or how does that work?
You could do it with a paper prototype, yeah, that's a possibility, but in our daily work we mostly build digital prototypes, and there are many different tools on the market, all with its strengths and weaknesses. Depends totally on the use case and of course on your personal preferences. So if you already worked with the tool before, then it's probably easier for you. And if you want to build a more simple prototype, then there are these tools. And if you want to build a fancy one with fancy animations, then there are other ones. You can of course also use other tools like even PowerPoint if you want to build a very basic prototype, or also coding software or code editors, for example, if you just want to visualize a bit of more interaction and more sophisticated like scrolling behavior or so.
Okay, in your daily work, I guess it would be Figma that we would use most
at
often?
DPM we use Figma most often, but it totally depends. We also had some projects where Figma worked to a certain point, But then like I said, we had like a scrolling behavior that we couldn't do in Figma, so we used a simple code editor, what is actually pretty cool because you just throw some images together and then fake this, and it's not responsive at all. Yeah.
So you mentioned that for each phase of the product development, or is it really development, or how would you call that phase?
It can also be used in the product discovery phase, but yeah, also very often in the product development.
So, okay, let's say in the earlier phases of product development, you would have different kinds or different types of prototypes. And how would you define which type makes the most sense for that exact purpose or phase?
Yeah, if you want to find out what prototypes are suitable for the phase, then there are three main questions that you can ask. The first one is, why are you building this prototype? So what is the purpose of the prototype? And there are either it is for validation, so for user testing, you want to find something out about your product, or is it for communication, so alignment with the team, with the developers, with the stakeholders and so on, or is it for presentation? That means it should be very beautiful and very fancy. You want to show the people that this is the best way to go.
And for user testing, it would be rather basic because you want to find out if users can they navigate within a prototype, or would that be too advanced?
They can navigate, and this is the second question. So who is your audience? Because for user testing, users are your audience, and here there should be no obstacles within the prototype. While for fancier prototypes, you can build your own flow. Because it's not that free to navigate in there, and you are using it yourself or you are presenting it to the audience. But if users use the prototype, then it should be very straightforward, and you need to consider a bit the usability, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so now I know why I'm building it, then I know for whom, and what's the third question to ask?
Third question is, what is the focus of your prototype? So it is either about the functionality, so how does it work, how is it implemented, how does it look like, so also all the UI things here, or it is about the concept. So what is the idea behind it, what is the value, what is the purpose. And these three questions, if you answer them, then you get different prototypes that you can use in different phases.
So would you be able to get a good understanding of how a customer journey could look like after just doing some prototype testings?
Customer journey, it depends on the prototype, I'd say. Because if you're in an early phase and you're testing the concept or communicating the concept, then it could be that you can find out something about the customer journey. If it's more about functionality, then it's mostly about product development and aligning with the team and aligning with developers so that they can implement it. Totally depends.
All right, so maybe you can give us some further explanation what the different prototypes are and how they differentiate from each other.
So if the purpose of your prototype is validation, then you're doing user testing, as I already said. And then you have the user test prototype, which focuses more on the concept, so the idea. So it doesn't matter how the prototype looks, it's just about the concept. So
that would be really hard for me. So it could be an ugly prototype of my fancy idea.
Quick and dirty prototypes.
Okay, all right.
And on the other hand, there is the usability testing. And the usability test prototype is much more about functionality. So how does it exactly work? How does it look? And here, of course, it also depends on the questions you want to clarify. But yeah, you have always this concept or functionality duality. And then if it's about communication, then there's either the alignment prototype, where you just want to discuss with your team and all the stakeholders how the product should work and also clarify uncertainties. And then there is the handover prototype. there you want to communicate with the developers. So everything should be pixel perfect because you want to translate your designs into the implemented version, so the real version of the product. And the third part then is the presentation. There we have either pitch prototypes, so the beautiful ones, where you want to show the concept to deciders and up to C-level maybe, and then either get a project or document a project, so just beautifully show what this product can do. And on the other hand, there's the vision prototype, which is like a time machine. So here you take an existing product and show how additional features could be added to the product in the future. So there you need a bit more realistic backbone because there is already an existing product and you just add new features to it.
All right, so you were talking about products a lot. Just to make it very clear, when you're talking about, or when you're mentioning products, are you referring to websites or?
So digital products in general, like websites, apps, but it can also just be new features that are added, for example, to a web portal or something like that. So all kinds of digital products, basically.
So you mentioned that prototypes are a huge part of your daily work at DPM. So maybe you can give us some examples or client cases where you worked with a prototype.
Yeah. As I said, we use prototypes almost in every project at DPM where UX is involved. And this is just because it's very handy to visualize ideas. And if I build a screen, I can directly make a prototype out of it. Like the smallest prototype would be a screen that is scrollable, for example. And regarding examples, we did the redesign of the checkout for private customers for Mnet, a Munich-based telecommunications provider. And here we use prototypes for user testing as well as for the handover to the developers in the end. And on the other hand, we had another cultural project for Bayerisches Nationalmuseum. So the redesign of the website of this museum. And here we mainly use prototypes for the alignment with the stakeholders to show our designs and our vision and how the website could look like. And then we just aligned with them and discussed the drafts and yeah.
Okay. One question regarding the first product you mentioned with Mnet. So would the handover to the development team, would it be like internal developers or were they part of DPM or another
They were part
agency?
of Mnet, I think. And yeah, it actually doesn't matter what developers, because you always need to somehow translate your designs and explain them to the developers so that they have a good basis to work on. And in this case, I think we built more small prototypes that explained specific behavior, like for example the shopping cart, how this should update if I do another selection. And yeah, so many small prototypes that were focused on specific behavior in the product.
And what I've heard a lot, just buzzwords flying around at this company, are high fidelity and low fidelity prototypes.
Yeah, so low fidelity prototypes are very basic prototypes. So you have screens and you just connect them with a click and there's not that much functionality behind it. And high fidelity prototypes are then very sophisticated. You have fancy animations, hover effects, and so on, and just a bit more realistic in the end.
All right, so let's imagine I would be a client and I come to you guys from DPM because I want to build a brand new website, which I obviously want to have super user-friendly. And maybe you can explain me how we would work together and at what point you would recommend me to prototype.
Yes. So in the beginning, we would probably have a kickoff workshop so that we can align what you want, what we have in mind, and Then we would go out and do some research, build some mood boards, have some hypotheses in mind, and then in the next step we would create first design drafts. And with these design drafts we would build a first rough mock-up just to click it through because it feels a bit more real. And out of this first draft we would go into user interviews, user testing to see if this is the right way to go. So you can't start too soon with prototyping and user testing, because it's so helpful to get the insights from the users, because we only have assumptions what users think, but asking them directly is super important.
And that's where you would need a prototype?
Yeah, there we would have like a first rough user testing prototype where it's more about the concept, the idea behind it, and afterwards when we're closer to implementation we would then probably do another usability test prototype where it's then more about functionality.
Okay, so we talked a lot about prototyping and the different types and when and how to use it. What would you say are the most important facts to take away from this episode?
Yeah, okay. So to cut a long story short, prototypes are a quick and easy method, or better said, tool to clarify uncertainties in a project. You can use them for validation, communication, and presentation. There are these 3 questions: why, what, and who, that you need to answer to find out what is the suitable prototype for your project or for your project phase. And in the end, that's maybe the most important thing, there is a suitable prototype for every phase of the product development.
So basically you're saying that prototypes are a handy tool in kind of every phase of the product development process.
Absolutely.
And I guess especially in the earlier phases it really helps to reduce uncertainty and save budget, money, time, resources, all the stuff you want to save. Okay, I think that's a good closing word or good closing words. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to have you back soon. I mean, you said you're an all-rounder, so I guess we'll find some further topics for you.
Definitely.
And you guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.